My white daughter-in-law was obsessed with her perfect family image. For the magazine photoshoot, she looked at my dark skin and told me I couldn't be in the picture because I would ruin the color harmony. My own son just stood there and let her erase me. He wanted a picture of perfection. She had no idea I'd already found her secret phone, and that I had my own pictures of her affair with my son's best friend, that would ruin her perfect family forever. Before I begin my story, I just want to say thank you for listening to me pour my heart out. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. I love hearing from you all. It reminds me I'm not alone in this. Now let me tell you what SHE did to me. My name is Genevie Lauron, but for the last 40 years, the only name that has truly mattered is Mom or Grandma. At 70, I had settled into the quiet, observational role that life often assigns to women of my age. I was a retired art history professor, a woman who had spent her life deciphering the hidden meanings in brushstrokes and the silent narratives of color and light. Now, my primary subject of study was my own family, a beautiful, polished composition that, upon closer inspection, revealed a series of disturbing, almost invisible cracks in the varnish. I lived in the house my late husband Julian Sr. and I had bought decades ago, a sturdy, comfortable home filled with books, art and memories. My son Julian Jr., his wife Leila, and my beloved grandson Leo lived just a few towns over in a sprawling modern mansion that always felt a little too cold, a little too perfect. Julian, at 42, was a good man, I believed, but a man whose spine seemed to have dissolved in the acid of his wife's ambition. He was a successful architect, but his true career was managing Leila's happiness. Leila, my daughter-in-law. At 40, she was a woman of breathtaking beauty and equally breathtaking insecurity. She was also a white woman, a fact that seemed to be both the source of her pride and the root of her prejudice. She was a lifestyle influencer, a career that seemed to involve taking endless photographs of her perfect home, her perfect child, her perfect life, and projecting an image of effortless elegance that was, in fact, the product of relentless, anxious effort. And I, Genevie Lauron, a dark-skinned black woman the color of rich, dark chocolate, a woman who wore her heritage and her history in her very complexion, was a problem for Leila's aesthetic. Her prejudice was never overt, not at first. It was a thing of subtle cuts, of carefully chosen words. She would compliment my exotic features with the air of a colonial explorer discovering a new species. She would talk endlessly about the importance of good lighting, especially when I was in the room, as if my very presence created a technical challenge. When she took family photos, she would always position me in the back in the shadows, her camera struggling to find the right balance. "Oh, Jenny," she'd say with a tinkling little laugh, "you're just absorbing all the light. You're a challenge." It was a joke, of course, but it was a joke with a sharp, ugly edge, a joke that sought to define my blackness as a flaw in her perfect white world. Julian, my son, would just stand by, his face a mask of pained neutrality. He saw it. He heard it. But he was a man terrified of his wife's displeasure, a man who had chosen a fragile peace over his own mother's dignity. His silence was a constant, low-level betrayal that had become the soundtrack to my life. I endured it all for the sake of my grandson Leo, and for the memory of the loving, functional family we once were. I clung to the hope that Leila's insecurities would one day soften, that Julian would one day find the courage to stand up for his own mother, for his own heritage. The upcoming event was their 15th wedding anniversary, and Leila was planning a party that was less a celebration of her marriage and more a content creation opportunity. She had hired a famous photographer, a man known for his glossy spreads in society magazines. The entire party was being orchestrated around a single perfect family portrait that would be the centerpiece of a feature about them in a local lifestyle publication. "Everything has to be perfect, Julian," I had overheard her saying to my son one evening, her voice a low, urgent hiss. "The lighting, the wardrobe, the composition. This is about our brand. It's about our legacy." Their legacy. A legacy they were building on a foundation of my quiet endurance and their shared, unspoken contempt for the one part of their family that didn't fit their perfect, assimilated aesthetic. Me. I felt a familiar, weary sadness settle over me. I knew my presence at this event, at this photo shoot, would be a problem for her to manage. I just didn't realize how cruelly, how publicly she would choose to do so. The veneer of their perfect life was about to be stripped away, and I was about to be confronted with the raw, ugly truth of my place in their world. The week before their anniversary party was a whirlwind of frantic, performative perfection. Leila moved through the house like a storm, directing florists, caterers, and furniture rental companies with the sharp, imperious air of a general commanding her troops. The house was being transformed, scrubbed of any trace of authentic lived-in comfort, and replaced with a sterile, magazine-ready elegance. My own small contributions, a lovingly arranged bouquet from my garden, a plate of my famous homemade cookies, were politely but firmly moved to a back room deemed not on brand. I retreated into myself, my presence in their home becoming smaller, quieter, more ghost-like. I spent most of my time in the guest room they had assigned me, a beautiful but soulless space, and in the small, cluttered storage closet at the end of the upstairs hallway. It was a place they never entered, a repository of the old things Leila found so distasteful. My late husband's books, my old photo albums, boxes of my own life packed away and forgotten. It had, in a strange way, become my sanctuary. It was in that closet that I made the discovery that would change everything. I was looking for an old photo album, searching for a picture of a younger, happier Julian to give to Leo, when my hand brushed against a small, unfamiliar box tucked away behind a stack of old hats. It was a sleek, modern electronics box, out of place amongst the dusty relics of my past. Curious, I opened it. Inside was a smartphone, a model I didn't recognize, clearly not one that belonged to me or my son. I turned it on, my fingers fumbling with the unfamiliar buttons. To my surprise, it wasn't password protected. The home screen lit up, a generic beach sunset. My heart began to pound with a slow, heavy dread. This was a secret phone. Whose secret? My first thought was Julian. Was he hiding something from Leila? A part of me, a foolish, maternal part, felt a flicker of protective loyalty. I should turn it off, put it back, pretend I had never seen it. But then my gaze fell on the photo gallery icon. And a different instinct, the instinct of a woman who had been subtly, consistently disrespected for years, took over. I tapped the icon. The gallery opened and the world tilted on its axis. It was not Julian's secret. It was Leila's. The screen was filled with photographs. Dozens of them. Hundreds, perhaps. Pictures of Leila, my daughter-in-law, my son's wife, the mother of my grandchild. But she was not alone. In every photo she was with another man. And that man was not a stranger. It was Donovan. Julian's lifelong best friend. His business partner. A man I had known since he was a teenager. A man I had treated like a second son. Uncle Donovan, as my grandson called him. The pictures were not innocent. They were a chronology of a long, passionate, and deeply deceitful affair. There they were, laughing at a candlelit dinner, a photo time stamped on a night Julian had been away on a business trip. There they were, wrapped in each other's arms on a beach Leila had claimed she had visited on a girls' wellness retreat. And then, the most devastating photos of all. Pictures taken in this very house. In the guest room next to mine. In their own master bedroom. Her in a silk robe I didn't recognize. Him with a triumphant smirk on his face. The dates on the photos stretched back over a year. The betrayal was so profound, so multi-layered, so utterly monstrous, it was almost impossible to comprehend. My son was not just being cheated on, he was being betrayed by the two people in the world he trusted most. His wife. And his best friend. A wave of nausea washed over me. I sank to the floor of the dusty closet, the phone clutched in my hand, my heart a frantic, trapped bird against my ribs. I thought of Julian, of his weary, stressed face, of his desperate attempts to appease his demanding wife, of his spineless silence in the face of her cruelty towards me. He was not just weak, he was a fool. A blind, trusting fool being played in the most brutal way imaginable. My first instinct was to rush downstairs to find him, to throw this phone at his feet and force him to see the truth of the sham he was living in. But I stopped myself. What would happen then? A messy, ugly, spectacular explosion. It would destroy him. It would destroy my grandson. And Leila, I knew, was a master manipulator. She would lie. She would twist it. She would somehow, impossibly, try to blame me. No. This truth was too powerful, too dangerous, to be unleashed in a fit of rage. It was a weapon. A nuclear weapon. And it had to be deployed with a cold, strategic precision. With trembling hands I went through the phone. I found her text messages with Donovan, a sordid history of their secret rendezvous, their shared jokes at Julian's expense, their plans for a future that did not include him. I found their plans for the upcoming anniversary party, their excitement about the magazine feature, their shared contempt for me, the old dark-skinned relic, who was ruining their aesthetic. I didn't cry. The pain was too deep for tears. It was a cold, hard, and utterly clarifying agony. For the sake of my son, for the sake of his fragile happiness, I had endured years of Leila's quiet, colorist cruelty. I had allowed her to diminish me, to erase me, to make me a ghost in my own family. But this was different. This was not just about me anymore. This was about my son, his honor, his life. And my silence, my long-suffering patience, was no longer a virtue. It was a form of complicity. I locked the phone and put it back in the box, hiding it once more in the deepest, darkest corner of the closet. But I knew I would be back for it. The family photo shoot was in 2 days. It was to be the centerpiece of their anniversary celebration, their public declaration of their perfect family. Leila had no idea that her perfect family was a lie, a sham, and that I, the woman she was so eager to exclude from her perfect picture, now held the evidence that would burn her entire world to the ground. The day of the family photo shoot arrived with a sense of impending doom that was almost a physical presence in the house. The air was thick with Leila's frantic, anxious energy. She had been barking orders at everyone since dawn, her voice a sharp, grating staccato. The famous photographer she had hired, a man with a bored, artistic air named Antoine, was arriving at noon, along with a team of assistants, lighting technicians, and a stylist. This was not a simple family portrait. It was a military-grade production, a campaign designed to project an image of effortless, aspirational perfection. I was, of course, expected to be a part of it. A small, peripheral part, but a part nonetheless. Leila had, with a great show of magnanimity, selected an outfit for me. A drab, shapeless beige dress that seemed designed to make me fade into the background. "This will be perfect for you, Jenny," she'd said, not asking but informing me. "It won't clash with the color palette." The color palette. I now knew that her obsession with appearances, with perfect composition, was a desperate attempt to cover the ugly, chaotic truth of her own life. She was building a beautiful frame to distract from the rotten canvas within. When the photographer and his team arrived, our home was transformed into a bustling film set. Lights were erected, backdrops were hung, and Leila, in a stunning cream-colored designer gown, preened and posed, the picture of a happy, successful matriarch. Julian stood beside her, his smile tight, his eyes weary. And my grandson Leo looked small and overwhelmed by the chaos. The photographer Antoine was a true artist. He was patient with Leo, coaxed a genuine smile from a stressed-looking Julian, and captured Leila's manufactured radiance with a professional skill that was almost admirable. They took dozens of shots. The whole family together. Julian and Leila. Leila and Leo. Julian and Leo. Then it was time for the final, most important shot. The one destined for the cover of the Society magazine. The multi-generational portrait. "All right," Antoine called out, his voice full of a weary authority. "Let's get the grandmother in here now. Mrs. Lauron, if you would please." I stepped forward from the quiet corner where I had been waiting, my heart a slow, heavy drum. This was it. The moment I had been dreading, the moment I knew Leila's subtle cruelty would likely turn overt. I took my place beside my son, my hand resting gently on my grandson's shoulder. Antoine, the photographer, looked through his lens, adjusting the lights, his brow furrowed in concentration. He murmured, more to himself than to anyone else. "The lighting on this side is a little tricky. The deep shadows, it's throwing off the balance of the composition." He was speaking in the neutral, technical language of his profession. But Leila, my daughter-in-law, seized upon his words with a vicious, predatory glee. This was the opening she had been waiting for. She walked over, her face a mask of sweet, apologetic concern. She placed a hand on my arm, her touch as cold as ice. "Actually, Genevieve," she said, her voice loud enough for the entire crew to hear, using my formal name with a familiarity that was in itself an insult, "let's have you sit this one out." I stared at her, my breath catching in my throat. "It's just," she continued, her voice dripping with a false, pitying sympathy, "your dark skin, it's just so absorbent of the light. It's creating a visual imbalance. It's going to ruin the color harmony of the photo. It will look messy. And we need this to be perfect." The room fell silent. The photographer, the assistants, even my own son just stared, their faces a mixture of shock and profound, awkward embarrassment. She had done it. She had said it out loud. In front of everyone. She had reduced my heritage, my identity, the very skin I was born in, to a compositional problem. A blemish. A thing that would ruin her perfect picture. I looked at my son, my own flesh and blood, pleading with my eyes for him to say something, to defend me, to reclaim my dignity. He just stood there, his face pale, his gaze fixed on a point on the far wall, his silence a final, unforgivable act of cowardice. He chose his wife's monstrous prejudice over his own mother's honor. The humiliation was a physical thing, a hot, searing wave that threatened to consume me. To be told that I, a woman who had taught art history, who understood the beauty of every shade and hue, was a visual imbalance. It was a cruelty so profound, so deeply rooted in a hatred I could barely comprehend, that it left me speechless. I did not scream. I did not cry. I simply slowly nodded my head. I see, I whispered, my voice a raw, broken thing. Of course. For the photo. I turned and walked away, my back ramrod straight, every eye in that room on me, their pity a fresh layer of shame on my already wounded soul. I retreated to my room, the sound of the camera shutter clicking behind me, capturing their perfect, harmonious, and now utterly soulless family portrait. I sat on the edge of my bed, my hands trembling, my heart a cold, dead thing in my chest. The quiet, patient woman I had been, the mother who had endured so much for the sake of a fragile peace, was gone forever. She had been murdered in that living room, a casualty of her daughter-in-law's vanity and her son's spinelessness. In her place, a new woman was born. A woman who was no longer interested in peace. A woman who was no longer protecting her son's fragile happiness. A woman who now understood that the only way to fight a fire that is consuming your life is to burn it all down to the ground. That night, I retrieved the hidden phone from the dusty closet. My grief had turned to a cold, hard, and deeply satisfying resolve. It was time to show my son the real pictures of the family he actually had. The rest of that day passed in a haze of controlled, icy fury. I did not emerge from my room. I heard the faint, distant sounds of the photo shoot wrapping up, of the crew packing their equipment, of Leila's triumphant, tinkling laughter echoing in the hallway. She had won. She had gotten her perfect picture, unmarred by my disruptive presence. She had, with a single cruel act, successfully excised me from the public narrative of her family. I sat at my small writing desk, the secret burner phone plugged into the wall, charging. My mind, which had been a chaotic storm of hurt and humiliation, was now terrifyingly calm, terrifyingly clear. The emotional part of this war was over. Now the strategic part, the part one was surprisingly, frighteningly good at, was about to begin. I was no longer just a heartbroken mother. I was an archivist, a prosecutor building my case. I went through the hidden phone with a methodical, dispassionate precision. I created a new, secure folder on my own laptop and began to transfer the evidence. First, the photographs. I selected the most damning ones. Not the most intimate necessarily, but the most telling. The ones that showcased the sheer, brazen hypocrisy of their affair. A photo of Leila and Donovan, Julian's best friend, clinking champagne glasses on a hotel balcony, time-stamped on the very weekend Julian had been away at a grueling business conference. A photo of them laughing together at a sporting event, Donovan's arms slung casually, possessively around her shoulders, while Julian was, I knew, at home sick with the flu. And the most recent one, taken just last month, a selfie of the two of them in a car, her head on his shoulder, a look of easy, familiar intimacy on their faces. The caption, a single, damning word, always. Next, the text messages. I scrolled through months of their secret communications, my stomach churning with a mixture of disgust and a cold, grim satisfaction. They were not just lovers. They were co-conspirators in a long-running emotional heist against my son. They mocked him. They laughed at his gullibility, his trust, his cluelessness. Jay is working late again tonight, one of Leila's texts read. His big project is so demanding. Poor baby. Your place or mine. Donovan's reply, on my way. Bring the good wine. The kind he pays for. They were not just betraying him, they were enjoying it. They were reveling in his ignorance. I saved screenshots of the most damning exchanges, arranging them chronologically, creating a clear, undeniable narrative of their deceit. Finally, I printed everything. I went to the small all-in-one printer in my room, the one I used for my correspondence, and I began to create a physical dossier of their affair. High-quality, glossy prints of the photographs. Crisp, clean copies of the text messages. I worked late into the night, my movements silent, precise. The quiet hum of the printer was the only sound, a soft, steady engine of my righteous fury. By morning I had it. A thick manila envelope, heavy with the weight of their lies. It was a complete, irrefutable story of their betrayal, told in their own words, their own images. It was a bomb, a carefully constructed device of pure, unadulterated truth, ready to be detonated. My initial thought was to confront them both, to throw the envelope on the dining room table and watch their perfect world burn. But that was too messy, too emotional. That would give them an opportunity to lie, to deflect, to somehow, impossibly try to blame me. No. My target was not Leila. She was a symptom, a poisonous vine that had taken root in the weak soil of my son's own character. My target was Julian. My goal was not just to expose her, but to awaken him, to force him to see the truth he had so willingly, so blindly chosen to ignore for so long. I had to get the evidence to him and only to him, in a way that was quiet, personal, and inescapable. I waited for the perfect moment. Came 2 days later. The proofs from the photo shoot arrived, a large, elegant portfolio delivered to the house. Leila was ecstatic, poring over the images, choosing the perfect one for the magazine feature. She selected a shot of the three of them, her Julian and Leo, a masterpiece of manufactured happiness, their smiles bright, their clothes impeccable, their family a perfect, harmonious unit. "Isn't it just divine, Julian?" she'd gushed, holding it up for him to see. "So much better without any distracting elements, don't you think?" Julian had just nodded, a weak, hollow smile on his face. That was my cue. I knew that Julian, despite his weakness, still had a shred of decency, a buried love for me that his wife had not yet managed to extinguish. The photo shoot, I knew, had shamed him even if he was too cowardly to admit it. His heart was already bruised. It was time to deliver the final, shattering blow. That evening, I waited until Leila was on a long, self-important phone call in her office. I found Julian in his study, nursing a glass of whiskey, a look of profound, weary sadness on his face. I walked in silently, the manila envelope in my hand. I did not speak. I simply placed it on the desk in front of him. He looked up at me, his eyes full of a tired confusion. "What's this, Mom? You and your wife are so concerned with pictures, with images, with presenting the perfect family to the world," I said, my voice quiet, devoid of any anger, any emotion. "I thought, before you send that lovely portrait to the magazine, that you should see the other family photos. The ones you weren't in. The real pictures of the family you actually have." His brow furrowed in confusion. He looked at the thick, heavy envelope. He looked at me, at my calm, unreadable face. Then, with a sense of dawning dread, he opened it. The quiet, devastating revenge was in motion. And his life, I knew, would never be the same. He opened the envelope with a slow, hesitant reluctance, as if he knew, on some primal level, that its contents would be the undoing of him. He slid out the stack of glossy photographs first, his expression shifting from confused curiosity to a deep, profound, and utter disbelief. He stared at the first photo, a picture of his wife, Leila, and his best friend, Donovan, clinking champagne glasses on a sun-drenched hotel balcony. His brow furrowed. "This, from her wellness retreat last spring," he murmured, more to himself than to me. "She said she went with her girlfriends." He flipped to the next photo. Leila and Donovan laughing, their arms around each other at a football game. This was the weekend I had the flu," he whispered, his voice a raw, hollow thing. "She said she had to go to an emergency work conference." One by one he went through the pictures, each one a nail hammered into the coffin of his perfect, fraudulent life. The selfies in the car. The intimate dinner. The final damning shot of them in his own home, in his own bedroom, her in a silk robe he had never seen, him with a triumphant smirk on his face. I watched as the color drained from his face, leaving behind a pale, ashen mask of pure, unadulterated horror. The man who had stood by silently while his wife had called me a visual imbalance, the man who had chosen his wife's cruel vanity over his own mother's dignity, was now being forced to confront a betrayal so profound, so complete, it seemed to have stolen the very air from his lungs. He looked up at me, his eyes wide, pleading, as if hoping I would tell him it was all a mistake, a terrible joke. Where did you get these?" he stammered. "They are from Leila's other phone," I replied calmly, my voice quiet even. "The one she keeps hidden in the back of the storage closet. I found it by accident. It seems your wife is not just a liar, Julian. She is a meticulous archivist of her own deceit." He let the photos fall from his numb fingers, scattering across the polished surface of his desk. But I wasn't finished. "The pictures are one thing, my son," I said softly, "but it is their words that will truly break your heart." He then saw the other papers in the envelope, the printed-out text messages. He began to read. I didn't need to see them again. I had memorized their casual cruelty. "Jay is working late again tonight. Poor baby. Your place or mine. Don't forget to delete this, handsome. He almost saw my phone last night. I swear if his old mother mentions her art history one more time I'm going to scream. So boring. Can't wait to see you." And the worst one, a text from Donovan to Leila. "Did you get him to sign the new investment papers yet? Once he does, we're golden. He's a fool, but he's a useful one." I watched as my son's world, his entire life, the very foundation of his identity as a successful, loved man, collapsed in on itself in the space of a few silent, devastating minutes. He wasn't just being cheated on, he was being played. He was a mark, a tool, a useful fool in their long, elaborate con. He made a sound then, a low, guttural noise of pure animal pain, and he buried his face in his hands, his broad shoulders shaking with silent, racking sobs. The arrogant, successful architect was gone. In his place was a broken, shattered little boy who had just learned that his entire life was a lie. I did not go to him. I did not comfort him. My heart ached for his pain, the pain of a son betrayed, but my own wounds were still too raw, too fresh. My revenge was not in his tears, not in his suffering. It was in the simple, brutal, and necessary delivery of the truth. He had allowed his wife to humiliate me, to erase me, to protect her perfect image. Now he was seeing the true, ugly face of the woman he had chosen over his own mother. I turned to leave him there, alone with the glossy, undeniable evidence of his ruined life. My work here was done. I felt no sense of victory, no satisfaction. Only a profound, weary sadness for my son, for my grandson, for the family we might have been. My revenge was not loud or public. It was a quiet, devastating delivery of the truth. I had not just gotten even. I had, perhaps in the most painful way imaginable, just set my son free. Free from the lies, free from the manipulation, free from the beautiful, hollow woman who had so thoroughly, so completely destroyed him. The house of cards had fallen. And now he was left to pick up the pieces. The night I gave Julian the envelope of photographs was the night our family, as we knew it, ceased to exist. I retreated to my room and listened as a profound, terrifying silence settled over the house. A silence that was heavier, more charged than any shouting match could ever be. I did not hear them argue. I did not hear them scream. I heard only the sound of a life imploding. Around midnight I heard the front door open, then slam shut with a violent, final thud. I peered through my window and saw Leila's car screeching out of the driveway, its tires a raw scream against the quiet suburban night. She was gone. The aftermath was a slow, painful, and necessary unraveling. The anniversary party was, of course, cancelled. The feature in the Society magazine was humiliatingly pulled, the editor citing unforeseen family circumstances. The perfect family portrait, the one Leila had been so obsessed with, the one she had sacrificed my dignity for, would never see the light of day. Julian did not emerge from his study for 2 days. When he finally did, he was a different man. The old, weary arrogance was gone, replaced by a hollow-eyed, haunted look. He looked broken. And for the first time in a very long time, he looked at me not with shame or annoyance, but with a profound, desperate sadness. Our first conversation was stilted, painful. He did not ask me how I knew. He did not blame me for showing him the truth. He just sat at my kitchen table, the same table where he had sat as a boy, and he asked one simple, heartbreaking question. "How long?" he whispered, his voice a raw croak. "I believe the affair has been going on for over a year, Julian," I replied gently. He just nodded, a single silent tear tracing a path down his cheek. The divorce was swift and brutal. Leila, exposed and with no ground to stand on, did not fight for the house or the assets. She fought for her reputation, trying to paint Julian as the villain, but the rumors of her long-running affair with his best friend had already begun to circulate, poisoning the well of sympathy she had hoped to draw from. Donovan, his best friend, his betrayer, had vanished, his own marriage and career likely in ruins. Julian, my son, was a man adrift. He had lost his wife, his best friend, his home as he decided he could not bear to live in the house they had shared, and his entire sense of self. He was a ghost in the ruins of his own life. And I, the mother he had so long neglected, so easily dismissed, was the only one left to help him pick up the pieces. It was a slow process. I didn't offer easy comfort or false platitudes. I was there. I cooked for him the simple, hearty meals of his childhood. I sat with him in the evenings in a comfortable, quiet silence. I listened when he finally, haltingly began to talk, to unravel the years of his own denial, his own complicity in his wife's superficial, cruel world. She always made me feel like I wasn't enough, he confessed one night, his voice full of a shame that was painful to hear. Like I had to keep striving, keep earning to deserve her. And I was so afraid of losing her, I let her treat you the way she did. I stood by and said nothing. And for that, Mom, for that I am so sorry. It was the apology I had waited years to hear. And in that moment, I felt a flicker of the old love, the deep, unconditional mother's love I had thought was gone forever. I know, Julian, I said softly, taking his hand. I know. Our family was not perfect. It was shattered, broken, scarred. But in the ruins we began to build something new. Something smaller, quieter, but something more real. Something built on a foundation of hard-won, painful truth. My revenge had been a quiet, devastating delivery of that truth. It had not been an act of rage, but an act of necessary, painful, and ultimately loving surgery. I had exposed the cancer that had been consuming my son's life, and in doing so, I had given him a chance to heal, a chance to become the man his father had always known he could be. I had been told my dark skin would ruin the family photo, but in the end, it was their own ugly, hidden secrets that had been brought into the light. I had not ruined their perfect picture. I had simply finally revealed the truth of what was underneath. And in that truth, in that painful, liberating clarity, we could perhaps begin to find our way back to a different kind of family. A real one,